talking about a very salient topic that means a lot to a lot of different people for a lot of different reasons. But before we get to that topic, I need to take a moment to explain to you all just what in the world it is that we're doing today because it's probably something that you've never seen before. So, what is civil dialogue? That's a nice little term that gets floated out there sometimes. When I say civil dialogue, I'm referring to a very specific format, a format that we're going to be executing today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain to you what civil dialogue's goals are, how it works, then I'll give my little spiel, my little presentation, and at the end of that presentation, you're going to see a very provocative statement, and that statement is probably going to make you feel a certain type of way. That's good. That's the idea. More on that in a minute. Okay, are we ready to get started in hearing about just what we're going to be up to? Excellent. So, what is civil dialogue? Well, the best way to describe it is it's sort of the anti-debate. We know what debates are, right? Two people get up on a stage, there's a series of topics presented, each party gets time to talk about that issue, and then at the end, someone is declared the winner and someone is declared the loser, unless you're talking about American politics, in which case both parties won and lost at the same time. What we're doing here is not very much that at all. In fact, I would go so far as to say it's the opposite. We're not going to have two pre-scheduled participants who come here and discuss preordained questions. We're not going to have a moderator asking those questions. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to engage with you all, the audience. And at one point, I'm going to ask 5 of you lovely people to come up here and to sit in the chairs that are way back there and voice your opinions about, like I said, a provocative statement. So here's the order of operations. I give my little presentation. I give you the provocative statement. We get 5 volunteers to sit in those chairs. Now, you may not be able to see it because it's kind of far away, but on those chairs is your own individual microphone as well as a series of signs. So those signs range from strongly agree to strongly disagree. I'm going to walk you through what they say right now. Let's start over here. This sign here, strongly disagree. It means you strongly disagree with the statement presented. But I'm a reasonable guy, so it's not just that you may strongly disagree, you may also just regular old disagree. So you can sit in this chair over here if you strongly disagree or if you just disagree. Now this chair over here, you can sit in it if you disagree or if you somewhat disagree. Same goes for the agree side. You can strongly, somewhat, or just regular old agree. Now the middle here is interesting. The middle has 2 options, undecided and neutral. Neutral means that you feel like you have enough information about the topic, but that you just don't want to pick a side. Undecided means you feel like you don't know enough about the given issue and would like to learn more before you take a side. That's important, because that person sitting in that chair is going to need to know which one of the 2 they are. So what'll happen is we'll get these volunteers to sit in these chairs. And then what I'll be doing is I'll be sitting behind this monstrosity right here. You won't see a whole lot of me. Each one of our 5 volunteers will take 30 seconds to a minute to introduce themselves by name. And in fact, we have name tags for all of our volunteers. They'll introduce themselves by name and they'll explain why they chose the chair they chose. Following those introductions, we'll have anywhere between 5 to 10 minutes of conversation between our 5 participants, depending on how well it goes. Then after that, we'll get the audience involved. And we'll have our student assistant coming around, so if you have questions or statements related to the discussion, or anything related to the topic, you in the audience will be able to participate even if you didn't volunteer. That'll go for 5, maybe 10 minutes, again, depending on how things progress naturally. Then we'll get closing statements from our volunteers. And then I'll stand up and I'll give a 2 or 3 minute summary of what was discussed, and then we'll be done. The whole thing takes 35, maybe 40 minutes. It'll go by fast, I promise. Are there any questions about the process? Couple other things to mention. Dr. Brown over here was nice enough to volunteer to be our fact checker. What's a fact checker? Well, in the context of civil dialogue, a fact checker is somebody who, if there's a specific date or a specific set of statistics, a number that can be proven or looked up, we'll mention it over to him. He'll hop on Google, or ideally Google Scholar, and find us a nice, appropriate answer. Or he'll say, you know what, the jury's out, we don't know. That's the only time we'll use the fact checker. Rarely does our fact checker get used, but it does happen. Now, the final thing I'll say about this format is the goal. In debate, the goal is to win, right? You want to win your debate. That's not what we're up to here, not today. Instead, we have 2 goals. Goal number 1, mutual understanding. What is mutual understanding? It's the extent to which we can understand, appreciate, and pay credence to the viewpoints of folks who don't agree with us, while at the same time feeling comfortable in stating our viewpoints to those same people. So it's the extent to which we and folks with whom we disagree can listen to each other, right? So we're not out here to win. We're not out here to change minds. We're here to be mutually understood. Goal number 2, civility. What is civility? It's the extent to which we allow other folks to exist in the same space as us peacefully and without fear of threat. So what that means is that people are more than welcome to voice their opinions up until the point where it attacks another person's character or right to exist. That's our line. That's fair, right? I think so. So that's what civil dialogue is. Are we ready to hear about our topic of the day? I'm ready. Good. I love the enthusiasm. So let's talk about critical race theory. First thing we got to determine is what in the world critical race theory is. And so the approach that I'm going to be taking here is what's known as the who, what, when, where, why, how. Did I get them all? Who, what, when, where, why, and how approach. Okay. I'm going to go out of order. I'll be honest. So first we kind of need to start with what critical race theory is and when it first came to be. So for those of you who can't see the presentation, I apologize. Just listen to the soothing sound of my voice. I promise I'll voice it all. Critical race theory emerged in the mid to late 1970s as a response to some of the post-civil rights legislation that was being undertook in the United States. For example, Richard Nixon's Southern Strategy, the war on drugs, redlining policies, a lot of these were in response to the civil rights movement. Critical race theory exists and existed in the 70s to explore the intentional or perhaps unintentional consequences that lawmakers created in writing those policies. So basically, critical race theory asks the question, how do things like the war on drugs, intentionally or unintentionally, target certain communities over others as bifurcated or trifurcated by race? That's what critical race theory attempts to explore. Okay? And it's been doing that for the last 50-ish years. Now, where do we find critical race theory? Well, as it stands now, critical race theory is largely taught in law school. It's taught in law school among a slew of other theoretical perspectives to help lawyers, litigators, and lawmakers alike understand the potential ramifications of their policymaking and of their legislation. So, critical race theory itself is not a monolith. It's one of many different types of critically based theories that exist. For example, there are critical theories of feminism, critical theories related to pedagogy or the science of teaching. There's critical theories of economics, and there are critical theories of race. So this is kind of like the basket in which we're existing. We're talking about one of many different perspectives that are most commonly taught in law school, and we're talking about one of many different perspectives that fit into the larger umbrella term of critical theories. Now, why is critical race theory worth discussing in the first place? Why is it important? Well, scholars who do work on critical race theory assert that it is important for lawmakers and legislators and judges and the like to understand the potential racial ramifications of their policies. That's what the folks who write on critical race theory purport. The reason that they think it's so important is because what they're trying to do is make it so that Jim Crow style laws do not reemerge in the United States. That was the original goal, and it has since advanced to be a little bit more aggressive, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But the idea here is to get lawmakers and judges and legislators to understand that there are potential unforeseen racial consequences of the laws that they put into play and the rulings that they craft in their courts. Now, this leads us to the how. How is critical race theory applied? Well, in a variety of ways. And in recent years, a lot of educational scholars have proposed that teachers take a more critical approach to the education system. Does this mean teaching children in grade school critical race theory? For some, perhaps. For others, not as much. The idea here is that in many ways, U.S. history, as it's taught in our grade school system, K through 12, obfuscates or leaves out a ton of information related to the not so great history of this country. Like, for example, the Tulsa Massacre or the Tuskegee syphilis experiments, or the argued erasure of indigenous peoples and their history and artifacts. And scholars who write about critical race theory argue that these obfuscations are either intentional or unintentional, but need to be rectified by allowing educators to teach kids about these issues. Now, this has, of course, been met with a substantial amount of backlash. Many folks have argued that the teaching of these violent practices in school, especially for younger kids, is inappropriate. And many of these same folks target critical race theory as the catalyst to this movement. And in this way, the idea of teaching some of the not so great elements of American history has become blended with critical race theory. That's important to note because it's going to be very meaningful for our statement, which is coming up in just a moment, I promise. So, last thing I want to talk about before we get to that, and the only thing that we've not covered, is the who. Who should be learning critical race theory? Now, as it stands, the large majority of people who learn this theory are in law school, and like I said, some other graduate programs contain elements of critical race theory or other critical theories. But for the most part, no offense to anyone here, present company, folks in grade school or even at the undergraduate level traditionally lack the theoretical capacity to understand the tenets of critical race theory, which is why it's traditionally saved until grad school. So, one way that we could approach this is to not say that we should be teaching children critical race theory, but instead that professional educators might benefit from learning about critical race theory. Why? Well, it's argued that the knowledge of things like racial tensions and histories can help create a more empathetic classroom environment and teach professional educators about the role that race plays in their classroom. Help them be better, especially as it relates to their students of color. Now that's going to lead us to our statement. Are we ready?
Yes.
Good, because it's coming. Here's our statement. All public educators should be versed in critical race theory. Now, this hopefully makes you feel a certain type of way. You may strongly agree with this statement. You may strongly disagree with this statement. You may be somewhere in between. You may be undecided. You may be neutral. Here's the kicker. We got to talk about what we're going over versus what we're not going over. What we're talking about is making it so that all public educators, meaning folks who teach at private schools and universities, need to learn about the tenets of critical race theory. We're not saying that they should be only taught critical race theory, but that, of course, among other topics and other theoretical perspectives, they should learn. We're also not saying that critical race theory should be taught in schools. What we're saying is that the people who teach should learn and be versed in critical race theory. So just a couple of distinctions there. And hopefully this statement has had enough time to marinate with you all, and you're ready to potentially volunteer to take one of these chairs. So at this time, I'm going to sort of remove myself other than to facilitate the volunteering of chair taking. But at this time, we need our volunteers. Now remember, you can strongly agree, somewhat agree. You can be neutral or undecided. You can somewhat disagree, or strongly disagree. With that said, is there a chair that speaks to anybody? We got one.
Agree.
You ready to come on up and volunteer?
Hell yeah. I like speaking to my people.
What do we have
Makes
here?
me feel good about it.
Undecided? Okay, so come on up.
Strongly disagree.
Strongly disagree. Beautiful. Come on up. Strongly agree. Come on up. We need one more. And I believe that that person should either somewhat or strongly or somewhat or regular disagree. Is that somewhat disagree? Come on up. All right, if everybody who volunteered could kindly hold on to their little laminated sheet that designates what their position is. This is the part where I do a whole lot less talking, so you're welcome in advance. At this time, what we're going to do is I'm going to adjust my live stream here so that we can see everybody. Thank you so much to our volunteers. Can we just take a moment and congratulate them via applause? Thank you. It's a vulnerable position to be in, and we appreciate that. This is the fastest I've ever gotten 5 volunteers, so that's either good news or horrible news. We'll find out. So what I'm going to do at this time is I'm going to sort of just sit behind this little thing right here, and I'll be taking my little notes. The only thing that I'll be doing as facilitator is 2 things. One, I'll be making sure we stay on topic. So, for example, if we start talking about something that strays away from this statement right here, I'll say, hey, don't forget the statement. And 2, I'll be making sure that everybody gets relatively equal talking time. Not identical, but relatively equal. So if I see that 3 chairs are doing most of the talking, I may speak up and say, hey, can we hear a little bit more from our other 2? That's all I'll be doing. We have Dr. Brown as our fact checker. And other than that, well, what I'd like to do now is I'd like to start with opening statements, which are going to be anywhere between 30 seconds and a minute long. We'll start over here and go around in a horseshoe fashion. So 30 seconds to a minute to introduce yourself. And as you do that, I'll kindly ask y'all to just put your names on these name tags and put them somewhere that can be seen by your fellow volunteers. Kindly introduce yourself and explain in 30 seconds to a minute why you chose the chair that you chose. So without any further ado, hopefully all the mics work.
Can you guys hear me?
Oh, do we? Oh, I am sorry. I am so sorry for that. I don't know.
My name's William. I clearly strongly disagree. I think in relation to all public educators should be versed in critical race theory. I'm not so sure what, you know, people who might have like a medical background or what have you would even be involved with being versed in critical race theory. And I don't know why we would have to have kindergarten teachers be versed in such topics when it is so. I mean, that has nothing to do with really their ability to, teach the kids how to develop further at that age level. So.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me? Okay. My name is Ben, and to preface this, I'll say that I'm not strongly opposed to the idea of educators being educated on critical race theory, but rather the idea that educators should be expected to learn about it because they already have too much on their plate as needed, and I just don't think that they would that they need to be educated in order to like relay the information to their kids, especially within like elementary schools. I just don't think it's necessary.
Yes, I'm Sydney. I'm undecided. I guess it's just because I don't have I don't have a full understanding of does critical race theory just include, like the good, the bad, the ugly of our history, and are we saying that our educators need to be well versed in the ugly so that we can teach and can learn? I guess I'm not quite understanding exactly the definition of critical race theory, which is why my opinion is undecided.
I'll be honest. Is this working?
All right. I'll be honest. I didn't actually know what critical race theory properly was until gentleman here explained it to us. But I do sincerely believe that, at the very least, probably like fourth grade and up, teachers should really be taught proper history in class, not some like sanitized nonsense that you've been in like elementary school and they taught like, Christopher Columbus, he just came over here and like totally discovered America, dude. And that was it. No, never mind. They just leave out like vast chunks of like all the horrible stuff that actually went on because it fits into some sort of American, all right, I might be rambling. Am I rambling? I'm sorry. My name is Joseph Matthews. I just think history should be taught properly, I don't think we need to leave out stuff to envision some proper form of America. America has a pretty messed up history, and I think improperly teaching that is a great disservice to the citizens of this country.
My name is December Thomas, and I strongly agree that every teacher should be versed in teaching critical race theory. I don't know the full definition of critical race theory, but because I'm a sociology major, I have learned certain things about it. But I will say that as long as it is racial injustices and disparities across our nation, it should be taught. Well, not, but every person should be learning about it. So even if you are in kindergarten, you should expect to learn about it by the time you hit maybe what 10th grade, 12th grade. So.
Cool.
Okay, so we've got 5 to 10 minutes ish of discussion. I'll be keeping track of who's talking and how often. So without any further ado, whoever would like to begin, go for it.
Can I ask one more question? Can we get like a good definition of critical race theory from you?
Or maybe just reiterate what you said earlier.
Sure. So, as that research indicates, critical race theory can be understood as a theory taught in law school that seeks to explore either the intentional or unintentional racial consequences of laws and rulings as it pertains to lawmaking and the courts. Is that helpful?
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh.
5 to 10 minutes.
Can I say a statement real quick? This is kind of highly opinionated, but I just hate the dialogue on CRT, because CRT in actuality is like, it's like a high level education idea. Let's talk about like, oh my God, they're gonna come into the kindergarten and teach us about, the slavery, whatever, they mean. But in actuality, it's just, a high level theory that's been horribly misconstrued by right-wing pundits to like, rile up their voter base and, vote for Republicans. And that's what it's kind of been. Trust me, in 3 months from now, no one's going to be talking about CRT. It's on to the next boogeyman.
If I can piggyback off of Joseph's point, I agree with him that we shouldn't expect people to go into kindergarten classes and just start teaching them about how their grandparents were awful people that did this. And since I don't think we're to expect kindergartners to be taught that, I don't think we should expect the kindergarten teachers to be taught on that. It's just it's unnecessary. It's unnecessary government spending. It's unnecessary expectation for the teacher.
Listen, I do slightly agree with that. I do think kindergartners probably up to I would say 3rd or 4th grade. It's fine if they don't learn it because, in those early development days, it's all about, ABCs, multiplications, writing and stuff. But once you start getting the history class, that's when I think, yes, they should be required to learn about this stuff, to learn about proper history,
I think the biggest thing I realize when I see all public educators should be versed in critical race theory is what exactly is critical race theory, because there is a very big disconnect. I know that he has stated that, but if you asked multiple different political figures, the answers definitely range and vary, and that's dangerous. Once you have something that is not so easily identifiable, how can it be in a textbook? And then we can see how that changes and evolves in a classroom. So maybe it is a 5th grade teacher who then takes it upon themselves to teach said critical race theory to kids, even though that might not be a part of their curriculum. Should all public educators be versed in critical race theory? I don't think so. I mean, because that would entail, what's your name, sir? James said that it's a high-level course, mostly taught in law school. Are we then going to say that every educator should go to law school? Or are you then saying that that this should be taught in lower levels to said public educators? That's very dangerous. That's very scary.
Let me ask you something. How is it dangerous?
I actually think I can answer that. I think that I think naturally, where a teacher lies can bleed into the classroom sometimes, whether it be a opinion or a political statement. Even if they're not teaching it, I think it can bleed into the classroom just kind of naturally. And I don't think that's necessarily a problem. But if the goal, or as you were saying, Will, is that young, if we're talking about every public educator, down from K to up to 12, if we're thinking that young, we don't need to start teaching that early. If a a teacher is well versed in that young, will it start to bleed on the 4 or 5 year olds that are just learning their ABCs or just learning their colors? Maybe is that what you more meant by dangerous?
Absolutely. I think what makes it dangerous is if you can't identify exactly what it is, then how is it to be taught and taught correctly? I mean, at the end of the day, generally truth is objective, and it can become very dangerous if you if you take truth, and if someone is not fully understanding of it, then they can take it as their own mantle to teach that truth.
Well, maybe critical race theory shouldn't be taught in just law school. Maybe it should be taught, like I said, in maybe the 10th grade or maybe even earlier than that, because I believe when you teach students even at an early age about racial injustices, it builds character in them. So the same way they learn numbers and letters and all these different type of things, they need to learn about how people who have a different skin color as them are charged differently than they are based off of their skin color, just because they have different deviancies to them. So it's not the simple fact of it's harmful to them. It's more of don't mean to be disrespectful, but anybody that disagree with it not being versed or people shouldn't be taught that, I don't think I would want them teaching my children that.
Listen, I just think if we teach like starting at like 5th grade or whatever, all right, I'm turning into a mush mouth here. I just think if we teach like proper history again, we correctly go on to what actually happened in America, of how like the South was, traitors practically, and they what am I talking about? I'm sorry. I'm just rambling.
On the basis of history being taught in school, I also noticed certain things as if, when you go into college and undergrad, I'm pretty sure all of y'all took American civilization, right? Right, that's not my history. So I'm required to take that as a general educational course, but you're not required to take African American studies. So that's another disparity right there, even within the education. So that's why critical race theory should be versed across everybody that teaches any type of classroom, even if it's special ed. They should know about critical race theory.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. But going back to your last point about how you think it should be taught in like 10th grade and stuff like that, I don't think that necessarily means that, say, like a 3rd grade teacher should be taught the same course that a 10th grade teacher should be taught, because the 3rd grade teacher doesn't need to convey that same information, or that even that could be even applicable to difference between a 10th grade history teacher and a 10th grade math teacher. I mean, we don't need to be teaching our math teachers about critical race theory, but I do think that we should be teaching our history teachers, but I just don't think all public educators need to be.
At the very least, I think history teachers should be fully versed in CRT. At the very least, because there's been a lot of bad stuff that happened throughout the years in America, and we need to properly teach it. Because right now there's a lot of stuff missing out. You could go to like different states and stuff that teach completely different history courses. If you go to California, it's like, yeah, this is what happened. Christopher Columbus came, and all these heinous acts were committed, and all these horrible stuff happened. And you go to like Florida, and it's like, yeah, Christopher Columbus, he was just a good dude. All he wanted to do was, have fun, whatever, discover America or whatever, it's completely false. And when you leave out horrible information like that, and people don't know it, how are they supposed to identify with other people who have different experiences? And we're all separated because no one knows, no one's been consistently taught the same thing, and we're all just arguing about stuff that shouldn't be argued about. It should be common knowledge. But unfortunately, in this country, all of our education systems are all split up, and we have different ideologies for each and every. All right, never mind. I'm sorry. I am.
So
I'm sorry about that.
Am I reading that wrong? You just look like you have thoughts.
I don't. If I do, I mean they're brewing.
So for somebody with lived experience of being African American, I've known many people who's been incarcerated, and I don't know the real numbers on how many African American people that are locked up compared to other people, but I do know the troubled journey that it brings on to people. So when I look at people from the aspects of being in like foster care and black single mothers out here that's on drugs and those type of things, I take everything with a grain of salt just because I know that when you live in America and the law isn't on your side, it's harder for you to do right. So it's kind of hard for me to not. It's hard for me to disagree with it being versed in every community because I can only see it through the light of my lived experiences, and I think it's very hard for anybody to make a decision on topics like that when they haven't lived it. That's just like men voting on abortion rights when they can't birth babies.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
I think that's an excellent point, but I just think there should be other approaches that should be taken rather than requiring all educators to take a course like that.
Yeah.
For example, I think it is possible to incorporate it in statewide curricula rather than just forcing the teachers to learn about it and then just hoping that the teachers convey the necessary information.
I think in the aspects of discipline in the classroom, it has to be not that it has to be taught by the teacher to the students, but the teacher needs to know about it. Because I think when we done lived in a world so long where people have pretty much ignored these different type of issues, I'm looking in the classroom as it, like you said, if you don't think a math teacher should be knowledgeable in that type of situation, well, if you got a classroom with mostly white students and you have an African American child in there, critical race theory will come important when you got to give them the benefit of the doubt when you discipline them inside of your classroom.
Interesting. I thought of that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. No, I think it feels like we've kind of fallen off track from the statement of all public educators should be versed in critical race theory. Something to consider is federal government does not dictate and statute those said laws. I mean, it is to go state from state.
Can I say one more thing? It should be federal government all over this country. I'm sick and tired of every state having a different curriculum than the other state, all right? We need a consistent baseline education system. We don't need states divvying it up and separating on who's in Congress or governor in that state. It needs to be federalized, federal law overrides state law, yada, 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 all that stuff.
All right, that's a good note to end on for this portion.
Also get backs.
We're now gonna take about 5 to 10 minutes to get the audience involved. So we've got Kitty over here with a microphone. If you've got something you'd like to say, pop your hand up, and we'll get in as many statements as we can. Remember, these can be questions for the panelists. It can just be statements, however you feel. So let's start it up.
Okay, so my question is, teachers need to re-up on certain skills every so often, kind of like sexual abuse and such, so that they can, see if it's any problems in the class. So where would it cost to run a CRT course? If it's already being taught that education teachers have to look at sexual abuse, why not look for critical race theory?
Interesting. Yeah. Also, racism is pretty bad. I don't know if you know that. It's not very cool.
All right, good statement. Would anyone else like to? I think we've got one coming in right here.
Is this working? Oh, it is. Okay, so just so you guys know, I fight on a daily basis racism within the schools. My husband is an African immigrant. I've got some of the most beautiful biracial children you will ever see. And my children started experiencing horrific racism in elementary school. We started seeing this implemented by teachers and academics. And I thought a really great point was brought up. If we're going to be talking about discipline happening within the schools, if we don't even talk to our educators about racism, the history of racism, and how it looks in a day-to-day basis, then we're not educating them just like how it's saying we're trying to prevent those Jim Crow laws from happening again. We need to talk about what it looks like on a day-to-day. And if my kids have to experience racism from the time they're in kindergarten, then we have got to do something. And it's one thing to experience racism from the other students, like that may happen, but the teachers can't even see it if they weren't educated on what CRT is. And it's hard for us to make an argument as to why we shouldn't be teaching CRT to educators without a thorough knowledge of it ourselves. And what it really is, and I thought, by the way, that was a fantastic overview of it. So thank you very much for that. But if our kids have to experience racism and we expect to be able to talk about, because if whatever you're seeing in society, it's happening tenfold in our schools. So if my husband's going to experience racism in Southern Utah and on his day-to-day lives, understand that my kids who have nothing to protect them is experiencing that every single day when they go to school. My daughter, because she was Black, when she was assaulted by a student, was herself sent to the principal's office. So maybe we don't need to educate kids on the horrific things that happen. We don't need to tell a second grader about all the raping and the pillaging. Maybe we don't need to go that far. But we at least need to have the educators know about it so that they can stop it when it's happening. Especially because we're trying to address rules and policies. Understand, those same rules, those laws that we have in society, that's what our kids are experiencing in the rules and the policies in the classroom. So if we can't see racism in society around us, we can't see it in the classroom, and our kids are going to be experiencing it and are experiencing that trauma. And then you get them funneled into the school to prison pipeline, because if they are told all their lives that they are lesser than by the administrators and the teachers, which they currently are, then they internalize that and see themselves as a bad person, which then funnels them into the criminal justice system. So at the very least, teach our teachers to see racism. That's it.
Yeah.
Do our five have any follow-up comments to that one?
Yeah. I mean, I don't really have anything to disagree with, so that's
I
pretty good.
totally agree. That's why I said on the basis of discipline, if you're in any type of environment where you have to discipline anybody, like she just said, her daughter was supposed to be given the benefit of the doubt, but yet she was sent to the principal office. That's why I even mentioned the whole discipline thing. It's hard for people to see it when they cannot see it.
I think that's a fantastic point. I mean, you can't deny experiences that have happened. It's fantastic point.
Another thing I want to say is, I wonder how do we fix these problems exactly? I don't know exactly how to. So if someone could give me a way to actually fix them, that'd be pretty cool.
I think in this case, the way to fix it that we're talking about is educating public educators about CRT.
Cool. All right.
We got
There we
another
go.
comment coming up
Pretty
here.
good.
Yeah, so I teach here in the teacher education program, so I teach kids who are becoming public school teachers. And I want to say something about why I think kindergarten teachers and math teachers should learn about critical race theory. The reason is because there are policies that affect teachers and the programs here in schools, whether it's kindergarten or whether it's a math teacher, and that is that the fact is that Black kids are referred to pull-out programs, referred to special education programs, diagnosed with learning disabilities, and are expelled at a higher rate than white kids are who have the same symptoms of the disabilities. Black kids tend to be overrepresented in all these policies. Teachers need to know about this overrepresentation. They need to be aware of their own unintended biases in referring kids and diagnosing kids and putting kids in pull-up programs, and realize that they have a role in that. So it's not teaching the kids, not teaching kindergartners about critical race theory, but the teachers need to be aware of how policies, education policies, sometimes inadvertently affect Black kids.
I think that'll give us time for one more audience comment. Before we do, would anyone up here like to address that comment?
I absolutely agree.
What she said.
Okay, one more audience comment if we've got the time for it.
Hi. I have two things to say. I'm not a teacher or anything. First off is that making teaching critical race theory on a more standardized basis would be great, because it's one of the prime examples of the rampant misinformation that we have in this country in news and all sorts of news. Like, I didn't know, I thought I knew what it is. I did not know what it is. That's the other thing I was gonna say. I also wanted to talk about how other countries have, like, teachers are amazing in this country. Other countries have much higher standards for their teachers, like what the teachers learn, and therefore they show up much higher on test averages. Like my mom, I don't know the exact specifics about this, but my mom told me about how in Finland, being a teacher is considered being on the same level as a doctor or a lawyer, and getting a little bit closer to that standard I think would be very beneficial for everyone. Thank you.
Do we get a pay increase with that? If I am now a doctor, I mean, I am a doctor, but do I get the surgeon's salary?
Yeah. Awesome.
I was just going to ask Dr. Brown if that is in fact true in Finland, because you said he was the fact checker. I'm not trying to put you on blast by any means. I just want to see, because that's kind of an interesting tidbit.
What was the fact you were trying to
Yeah, it's a bit difficult to determine whether or not their level of respect is that. I mean, I can tell you that that could be one of two things. It could be that they respect lawyers and doctors. As a lawyer, I can understand that they're not well respected in a lot of parts of Europe, but that could mean that they're not as well respected. Now, if you're talking about pay, that's a fact that we could check. But and the pay is probably more on an equal basis than it is between educators. Yeah.
Okay, so at this time we're going to need to switch to the point where we go into closing statements. So just like your opening statements, we're going to take 30, 45 seconds to just talk about has your opinion changed? Has it remained the same? How do you feel now? Remember, the goal here is not to alter any opinions, but just to see how we're feeling after. So we started over here last time. We'll start over here this time. So December, if you could start us off.
So I was just wondering, did anything I say change any of y'all minds or made y'all see it any different type of way? So you was neutral. Exactly. So.
Me too. I didn't know much about it. Now I know better. We should teach about CRT. It's a good thing.
So December, you're feeling similar to how you were before?
Oh yeah, I'm standing on it. Yes,
I went from agreeing to now I strongly agree.
Okay. So that'll take us very rapidly over to Sydney. How are we feeling here?
I by no means feel like I am well versed in this topic or conversation. I do feel a little bit more neutral, where I see both sides very strongly, especially after your personal experience that your daughter's experienced, and I appreciate your comment. I think I can see the side of the benefits and the pros to every teacher in public education being well versed in it, so that they can see what is happening in the classroom. But then I also do see the other side of adding to the plate of that of if that's the age you're going to teach. So I feel like I have gone from undecided to more of a neutral idea.
Very nice. We gotta keep moving forward, but that's okay. So Ben, how are you feeling? Same, different, anything in between?
I would say that I still disagree, but probably I agree a little less than I did when I first got on this stage, because hearing all the examples of times where it's directly affected the kids, I think it's important that teachers are at least taught like racial sensitivity, and it's something that's really important to me. But I still think that if we're going to hold teachers to those standards, we need to either pay them more or kind of pull from their responsibilities somewhere else.
All right, last but not least, finish this off.
No, I appreciate it. So I think, just to be very clear, the discussion was if public educators should be versed in critical race theory. Obviously, we all want racism to be rooted out. If there is any, that needs to end. I guess what I'm trying to say, though, is I don't know if all public educators should be versed, because I don't know if that qualifies necessarily every educator, or is a part of their qualification to be a good educator. I think that there are things, maybe continued learning could potentially be involved. But I think, to me, I think that it should not be not all public educators should be versed in CRT because it is a very deep concept, and it goes mostly into the legal issues revolving race, and so I feel as though that's more of a lawyer, law school type discussion.
All right. Well, remember how I asked y'all to give a nice little round of applause when they first got up here? Can we give them a little bit more this time? It's a very difficult thing to talk about. Thank you all so much for sharing your experiences. You can feel free to leave your stuff there. I'm going to take the next 2 minutes here to provide a very, very, very short summary of everything that we just discussed. And I'm going to do it by using central themes. So some of the themes that I saw developing as we progressed through all of this. One, I saw the theme of definition. The enthusiasm and desire to better define what it is that we talk about when we talk about critical race theory. Now, I know I'm not perfect. I tried my best to give the technical definition of critical race theory, but that's not the only definition that we grapple with in society. And just because some folks may have misunderstandings, it doesn't mean that those misunderstandings don't result in very real perceptions. So it's our responsibility as a community to continue defining and redefining exactly what it is that we're talking about. The other big theme that I noticed across everybody's discussion is at what level should this occur? Should this be federal? Should this be state? Should this be local? Should it be for only high school teachers and above? Where should it go? I don't have an answer to that. I'm sorry. I know everybody's waiting on bated breath for me to have that answer, but I just don't. And again, it's a community conversation that needs to continue. The discourse needs to continue to evolve around where and when should people be learning about these things. And then the final thing that I noticed as it relates to our discussion today is the idea of patience. Everybody was very patient. There were times where folks spoke out on issues that you may not have agreed with them on. But what I noticed as I looked out across the audience and our volunteers was a lot of patience. There was not a single outburst. There was not a single instance in which somebody said something like, well, you're wrong. And that's the point of what we do here in Civil Dialogue. So I want to take a minute to thank all of you for your patience and for your enthusiasm for knowledge. As predicted, smashing success. Give yourselves a quick little lift up because it's Thursday. We're getting close to the weekend. All right. Well, on that note, we are finished and done with the Civil Dialogue. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Brown to give closing remarks. Thank you all for coming out. Much appreciated.
All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate it, James. On the Finland thing, we found a couple articles that said it's actually harder to become a educator than it is to become a doctor or lawyer in terms of looking at acceptance rates and things like that. The disparity between doctors, lawyers' pays, and educators is smaller in Finland than it is here. And they're paid more in Finland as well. Okay, so thank you so much, James. That was wonderful. We really appreciate you coming in and doing that. Let's give another round of applause for James. I think we have to do this again in the spring. What do you think?
I'm here to do it every semester.
Okay, all right, sounds good. Hey, thank you so much for coming out. We'll see you in 2 weeks for our next Pizza Politics, which will actually be in the ballroom. We're going to have some international students come and speak and discuss some issues related to that. Okay, thanks again.